Welcome to Tax Insights, presented by Hawkins Ash CPAs.
And good morning, listeners. Welcome back to Tax Insight here on WOMT with Jeff from Hawkins Ash. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Terry.
How are you, sir?
Cold.
Yes, I agree. It has been a cold week, but hey, it's Wisconsin winter weather. We have to expect it.
Exactly.
Jeff, today we're talking about the employee retention credit.
We are, because, as many employers continue to feel the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the effects have continued into 2021. And the president now says that, we may not get our vaccines until fall of this year. So to help businesses, the government has issued some new legislation. This is part of the tax bill that was signed back in December. And these changes made a significant impact on the employee retention credit.
So this is a credit that we have not yet talked about, right? Or is this something new?
Yeah, it's not necessarily new, but we haven't talked about it a lot. But this credit is really going to help small businesses that kept people on their payroll. And with the changes that were made in December, I think it really can make a difference.
So when did this credit start?
It actually started back in March of 2020 when the pandemic started, but now it's been extended to June 30th of 2021. Now, the reason why we didn't talk about it a lot is because last year it wasn't as beneficial, because if a company received PPP funds, they weren't necessarily eligible for it. But that's changed now with this new legislation. Now, those businesses that took PPP funds can also take advantage of the credit as long as the same wages aren't used for both. So, it's the old no double dipping. This change, though, was made retroactive back to 2020, which is also good.
So what's the maximum amount of this credit?
I think here's where you're going to see the biggest changes. So back in 2020, the credit was based off of 50% of qualifying wages up to $10,000 of wages. So your maximum credit per year was $5,000. Now, with the changes that were made in 2021, the credit is actually based off of 70% of qualifying wages up to $10,000. So the maximum credit goes up to $7,000 per employee. But unlike in 2020, where the $5,000 was a max per year, this $7,000 is a max per quarter, which means that if a business qualifies in the first and second quarter, the maximum credit per employee could be as high as $14,000.
And that obviously is up from $5,000 per year from prior years. So this definitely is a change here. How does an employer actually qualify for this?
So they have to meet one of two tests. Their operations had to be either fully or partially suspended due to government orders, or, and I think this is where most businesses are going to qualify, in 2020, they had to have at least a 50% reduction in their gross receipts compared to the same quarter in the previous year.
So did that change for 2021?
It did. In 2021, businesses are eligible for this credit if they had only a 20% reduction in their gross receipts compared to the same quarter in the previous year. So if you think about it, like your first quarter of 2021 here, if that is 20% lower than your first quarter of last year, you're going to qualify for this new expanded credit.
Interesting. So is this a quarter by quarter calculation?
It is. So unlike some programs, a business can take this credit for the quarter that they have a reduction. And they can qualify for multiple quarters. So if you qualify in the first quarter but not the second, you get it for the first. If you qualify for both the first and second quarter because of your gross receipts reduction, you get it for both quarters. And remember, like we talked about before, the maximum credit per employee is $5,000 in 2020 and as much as $14,000 in 2021.
Jeff, a lot of great information here on the program. Last question, anything else that we should know about before we end today's episode?
Yeah, so it really depends on the size of your business, how the qualifying wages are calculated. So for example, in 2021, if you have 500 employees or less, then the credit is based off of all the wages that you paid. If you have more than 500 employees, then the credit is only based on those employees who you paid but weren't actually at work. So you kind of paid them to keep them on the payroll. In 2020, that 500 employee threshold was only 100. Lastly, this credit is taken on the employer's quarterly Form 941. And because we talked about earlier, the changes being retroactive back to 2020, if a company determines later on that they could have taken the credit for 2020, they can always go back and amend their 941 to get it.
Jeff, again, a lot of great information each and every week here on Tax Insights. If people have questions they need to connect with your team at Hawkins Ash, what is the best way of connecting with you guys?
I would go right to our website, which is hawkinsashcpas.com, and go to our COVID-19 section.
Jeff, thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you next week.
This has been Tax Insights, presented by Hawkins Ash CPAs. Learn more online at hawkinsashcpas.com. Hawkins Ash CPAs, part of your business, part of your life.